Later, in April 6, 2018, City Council meeting, Larkin, Lamp, and Reinerson, better known as Larkin, presented the results of the water rate study. And they also recommended building a 2 million gallon per day plant in order to save the cost of the compatibility testing, the estimated cost of $500,000 per year to buy the water, and the connection cost. Following the water restrictions imposed by the city due to water capacity limitations, City Council directed staff to look into other water sources besides Hillsdale Lake. So tonight we have a presentation by Burns and Mack looking at the Water One, Gardner Lake, and the Hillsdale upgrades. Staff is requesting the council to provide direction on which alternative to pursue. This information will be provided to the UAC so that in conjunction with the information obtained through the rate study, a recommendation may be developed and presented to the governing body at a future date. As a side note, Water 7 has shown interest in sharing costs in the Hillsdale water treatment expansion or the Water 1 connection. Having said that, we have Jeff Klein with Burns McDonald. He'll do the presentation comparing the 3-4 options we have.
Great.
Maybe 5.
Thanks,
Thank
Gons.
you.
Thank you, Gons. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right. We'll keep it right on track. And again, if Chief Score, just cut me off and let everybody know what's going on so they don't get too anxious. So it's great to be here. Very interesting listen about National Community Planning Month, very fitting. And on the electrical side, talking about local control. So we're going to get into a little bit of that as we walk through these slides. I'm Jeff Klein. I'm project manager with Burns and Mack. John Mitchell is here with me. And we're pleased to be here tonight to discuss the water supply alternative study that was completed in March and the schematic design that was completed subsequent to that. So if you have any questions, we can either wait till the end or you can just ask us as we go, and we're perfectly good with that. All right. Which?
Trey.
Okay. Thank you. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about background. We're going to talk about, from the demand side, historical use and forecasted demands from the latest master plan. And as you're all aware, demand is outpacing capacity, and it's gotten to a point where urgency has turned into emergency. From the supply side, we evaluated over 25 alternatives between the two studies, looking at Water One, looking at Gardner Lake redevelopment, and looking at Hillsdale water treatment plant expansion. We also did a present value comparison because that's the only real way to look at these alternatives and get a real apple-to-apple comparison. Now, we also are available to discuss market drivers, construction cost trends, and project delivery options and how they'll help you deal with these urgency challenges. All right, this exhibit shows your historical water use and your projected water use. The blue line is the average day. We don't really need to deal with that. We really need to focus on maximum day, as maximum day drives how much water supply capacity you need, how big you build the pipes, how big you build the plant, and how big of a finished water main you need. And you are limited right now from a supply side and a treatment side to 4 million gallons per day. You exceeded that in 2012, and you've exceeded it or met it this year with under restrictions, as you guys know. Now we're looking at, by 2020, needing 5 million gallons per day. By 2027, needing 6 million gallons per day. Needing over 8 million gallons a day by 2040, and in the 2008 master plan that we did, and I was part of that, managed that as well, we had a build-out population, a build-out projection of 12 million gallons per day. Now remember, we can only deliver 4 million gallons a day, so we need to get something going as quickly as possible. The problem is that none of these alternatives are really going to solve the immediate challenge overnight. They're all going to take a little bit of time. On the good side, you have increasing building permits and planned developments, which is great, but we're running a little bit behind on the water supply side. When looking at the Water One alternative and the expansion of Hillsdale, it's going to take, we estimate, minimum of 20 months, depending on the low side, and more, potentially more, depending on the delivery alternative. So for summer 2019, summer 2020, depending on what the weather does, the water conservation plan could come back into use, and there's still a possibility of restrictions during that time period. Also, again, 6 MGD by 2020, that really drives that 2 MGD lump of water that we're really looking at. So this map kind of shows the different alternatives. You see Gardner Lake up to the north, redeveloping a water plant just downstream of the dam where there was an old water plant. Water One connection at 175th and Monticello, about 2.5 miles away. As their system grows, there's a possibility that that pipeline could become shorter in the future. And then redevelopment of Hillsdale at the existing site, utilizing water from the reservoir. Now, all these sources, back in the day, Gardner Lake was a fine source. Hillsdale produces great water. Water One's a great organization. They produce great water as well. But all the water qualities are different, as you heard. And without chemical treatment, they're not compatible. So for the March 2018 study, that was really focused on Water One, redevelopment of Gardner Lake, and Hillsdale expansion. And for Water One, we looked at 2.5 miles of 16-inch pipe plus an interstate crossing, chemicals, and a metering station, pressure reducing, etc. For the water enters Gardner system, so the water's compatible, so you don't have distribution system issues. But that has a low capital cost, but a high operating cost. And it would be a satellite facility that operations would have to deal with. Redevelopment of Lake Gardner had the highest capital cost. It was a satellite facility. It would be need to have personnel at it whenever it was operating. And there were some concerns about how the lake levels might vary, given that's a very important recreational resource, as well as a lot of folks have housing along it. And then Hillsdale, we had looked for this option at really just finding 2 MGD of primary treatment and filtration and trying to utilize to the best of its ability some of the existing facilities on the site. Since the intake pumps and pipeline are limited to 4 MGD, we had to do a new pipeline as well. So we put that in the cost. That was the lowest present value or life cycle cost compared to Gardner Lake and Water One. But it also spurred some other things, primarily the schematic design project, which we'll talk about shortly. Let's talk a little bit about Water One. It is a second supply, and they can provide you 2 MGD through 2.5 miles of 16-inch pipe highway crossing. But it is a second water supply, and there is a water compatibility risk that needs to be managed. I can tell you today that I can save you $100,000 that you don't need to do a corrosion study, because it's not going to be a corrosion issue that you're going to deal with. It's going to be a scaling issue, which is the upper picture where you see the calcium carbonate buildup in the pipe. That's what needs to be managed chemically to make the waters compatible. It can be done, but there will be a cost associated with it. I don't know what that cost exactly is. We made estimates of that, but will definitely need to be done. Otherwise, you will have calcium carbonate scaling in the pipes. There's a high potential for cloudy water, turbidity, resurfacing coming out of the pipes. Customer complaints, the whole shoot and match if it's not done right. Water One has a lot of different contracting mechanisms. It's going to be what really makes the economics, or what really determines how much you pay, is how long of a contract and what minimum you're willing to take, if any. And that's going to drive the connection fee on a per million gallon per day basis, and the unit cost of water in dollar per 1,000 gallons. Additionally, you will need land, and most of the land that you need to acquire is in Overland Park. Water One will likely provide some assistance on that, but we feel that project has a 20 to 30 month duration from the time you get going, get the design moving, get rights of entry, get all the geotech you need for it, because the pipeline will be in rock. Start dealing with KDOT and just working through all those. It's, again, talking about minimum of 20 months, which means summer 2019, summer 2020, no water, but ready for water for spring 2021. The cost on this project is, we have this at $8.5 million, and that's for 2 million gallons per day. So when we did the life cycle costs, we assumed that there'd be a minimum of half an MGD, which allowed us to use the almost $1.2 million per MGD in the connection fee, and use the lowest $2.44 per 1,000 gallon 2018 cost in the present value in the cost of water. Just to note that $2.44, the plant here treats water at about half that cost. So let's talk a little bit about Hillsdale. Everybody on this side, now I'm going to block you out. So you have a really nice site for a water treatment plant. Slopes, have a nice slope from top to bottom, which typically is great for gravity flow. However, when they built the plant, they put it in the middle. And if you've been to the plant, you see that there's pumps everywhere, pumping from one stage of treatment to the next stage of treatment. And then the solids flow down to this little sump, and then they get pumped back to the residuals handling basins, which are at the top of the site. Pretty much the prime real estate for your primary treatment filtration. The plant is limited to 4 million gallons per day. It is hydraulically limited. In fact, prior to the improvements that the water plant staff did, they were hard pressed to get more than 3.8 million gallons a day through there without flooding out the whole facility.
Is this all because of the fact that topologically it was put in the wrong place?
For starters, and it's obviously not designed to gravity flow from one stage to the next, but one could say that the hydraulics just aren't correct in the design.
So we got two problems.
Yeah,
basically.
Now it functions. The water plant staff does a great job of making it work, but we're going to talk about how over time we're going to. With the Hillsdale alternative, you have the opportunity to not only grow the expanded plant, but eventually replace this facility all in one fell swoop, or all over time.
Yeah. Not
one fell swoop. It doesn't have to be one big, go big, build 6 MGD. Let's talk about building 2 MGD at a time. So when we're walking through this with plant staff, this is what really spurred the schematic design project, is, the plant's a little over 10 years old, It's not paid off. There's still debt service. We need to keep it operational. But there's some deficiencies. The plant staff could use some additional storage capacity out there. So when they are doing maintenance, they have more storage that they can pump out of to serve the city. There are a number of challenges. And again, schedule urgency. So what we came up with in the schematic design. Thank you. Was to go back and basically rebuild the plant, utilize the site the way it should be, just by taking out one residual basin. Again, you do need a slide. Yeah. Okay. You have 3 intake pump slots at the intake, or small intake pumps. We can't put 3 larger pumps in there because there's not enough room. But what we can do is we put 2 intake pumps in there and have the contractor provide a stock spare. So in case you lose one, you're not out very long. You're not out weeks of time. You're out hours of time. You got a new pump installed. We can put in a new 24-inch pipeline that can handle 12 million gallons per day from the intake to the water treatment plant. The existing carbon basin, where all the water currently comes in, serves as a capacity 4 MGD at best. So we opted to put in a new carbon contact basin and a new carbon feed system. That was designed not for 2 MGD, but for 6 MGD. So when we build that basin, building it a little bigger now isn't that much more expensive. With room to expand it and put a second carbon contact basin in. Water then goes with flow by gravity to a 2 million gallon per day primary treatment basin, set up such that it can be expanded in 2 MGD increments in a modular fashion. So room for 6, build 1 now, save the space for the other 5. Water then flows by gravity to the filters. Again, build 1 2 MGD filter now, space for 5 more. And make sure everything's common wall construction so it can all just easily be added to. So there's some upsizing of some initial pipes for 6 MGD, little things like that.
What about the filters we have now? Because can we just buy those, or do the existing filter system work, or?
It works with the existing plant. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just wondering, because we spent quite a bit of money on those, didn't we, the new filters?
They're not expandable.
Okay. Right, that's what I was wondering.
They're small too. It's kind of an odd setup.
I remember we had that discussion whenever we talked about it before, that they were kind of unique, and that's why they were expensive.
Yeah.
Included an additional 1 million gallon clear well. That would give you 2 million gallons plus your 500,000 gallon disinfection tank, which is really all you would need for a plant upwards of 12 million gallons a day. The existing high service pump station, there are 3 pump slots. One has a 2 MGD pump, and the other 2 slots have smaller pumps. We propose to upsize the piping and put in 2 MGD pumps and have a stock spare for staff. Pretty much making the most of what we can with the existing facility as it is. Get you up to 6. New backwash pump station to provide backwash water to the new filters. That's so all be sized the same. You're done. Put it in for 1 filter. You've got it for all the filters. New chemical building for your chlorine gas feed. Put in a scrubber for safety and the additional chemicals to feed affluent existing water treatment plant. 2 additional residual holding ponds down at the bottom. And then site work, piping, electrical, and SCADA, which will help get you through that 6 to 12 MGD capacity. And giving staff a single generator that can run the whole plant at 6 MGD.
If you want to turn that around, you can have it for the public to see too.
I had John come up and do his Vanna White. All right, so this option, this alternative, has a cost of $21 million. It's higher, obviously, than Water One, but the operating costs are significantly less. It also eases future expansion. It provides the city with a lot of flexibility to go in and expand the plant is going to be very simple over time. It allows for existing water treatment plant replacement, and it will help correct some of the deficiencies with the existing facility. So one thing to note on this slide at $21 million is that there's only two rows that are rated for 2 million gallons per day. Everything else is either 6 or 12. One of the risks with the Water One alternative, and it's a solid alternative, but it doesn't really set the city up for the next 2 million gallons per day in 2027, which means in 2024, which isn't that far off, you got to start planning, designing, getting out construction contracts. So you've got your 8 MGD by 2027. So present value, life cycle costs, apples to apples comparison. When we look at the Hillsdale expansion of 2 MGD to give you 6 MGD at the site, and with the raw water improvements, you can see that that's got a 20-year present value of $44.6 million versus the Water One at $53 million. Now, debt service that I ran it out for 20 years. So when the debt service goes away, that gap starts to grow very quickly. And the 30-year present value for a Hillsdale alternative is 55 versus Water One of 76 million. So the gap just grows quite a bit in 10 years, and every year after that. On the total expenditure side, Hillsdale, 61 million in 20 years, 74 million for the Water One alternative. Take that over 30 years, it's 82 million versus 122 million.
So I'm gonna kind of ask a real quick question here.
Sure.
I think there's a couple of core assumptions we're probably going to have to revisit on some of this. One is that I don't think we're looking at a mutually exclusive alternative here. I think that from the perspective of a second source of water, I think everybody on this dais is agreeing that we need to have a second source of water. If anything were to happen to our Hillsdale facility, this city would be in dire straits from the standpoint of water in a very short period of time. Now, how much are we willing to pay in terms of a premium for water security? That's a policy question that we'll have to discuss. But I think that's something we need to have on the table. And I don't see these two as mutually exclusive. I think we can increase capacity at Hillsdale while bringing a Water One interconnect online in the short term to allow us to have some sort of one secondary source of water security, but also understanding that Water 7 has expressed an interest in helping to defray the cost on both alternatives. And so I think we've got some partners that might be willing to help to do that.
Yeah, it's always nice to have some additional connections, be they emergency connections or other. That's actually the fourth row. You can see over 20 years what you would spend on a total expenditure side or present value side, having Water One at 2 MGD and Hillsdale expansion concurrently.
And again, if you can defray that cost through partners, that might have that might change the equation, the calculus a little bit.
Right, we can certainly go in there and look at some of the cost sharing, how that changes the numbers. So from the perspective of pretty much cost, from a cost and quality management standpoint, the recommendation that we're making to you is to expand Hillsdale. It does have the lowest life cycle costs over 30 years of 21 million, lowest expenditures by 40 million, lowest cost of water, eliminates that water quality risk, and it really prepares the city and the plant to meet those future needs in a flexible, incremental, and economic manner. And again, both projects are going to take, based on an EPC or engineer, procure, construct, or design, build approach to the water plant, it's going to take 20 to 24 months. And to go out and build, make that connection to Water One, that's about 20 months. So you're going to be on very similar timelines.
We got a couple of questions for you, and it might be for staff, Laura or Matt. What kind of debt service do we have on Hillsdale now? Okay, that's fine. And then what size of pipe, what size is the clean water service line to Gardner? How big is the
Currently?
pipe service? Yes, sir.
18. It's an 18-inch line. It's good for 5.5, maybe 6 million gallons per day.
So is that sufficient, guns, or does that need to get bigger too?
That will need to get bigger later, probably a 24-inch.
Because the way it was explained to me is that we had a 5-gallon bucket of water with a straw at the bottom of it, trying to get 5 gallons out of it. Just
It's the raw water from the intake to the plant and treatment at the plant. You actually have more capacity to push water out
okay, then to pull it in.
than to and get it to the city.
Okay.
Which is why you're recommending the additional water intake line.
Correct.
Is that a 24-inch line that you're asking?
Correct. And that would get you out
Yep.
through build-out. That'd be one and done.
Yeah, all the way to 12 million.
Thank you.
12 million gallons per day, not $12 million.
Also, in addition, in the master plan, there is a project to add a second transmission line from Hillsdale to the city.
Right.
So you will have 2 transmission lines instead of 1 that we have right now.
When you,
And I'm all in favor of Plan B, by the way. I mean, I understand there's a cost to it, and we've got to be good stewards, but what we've just discovered is one source, no water.
That's my concern. If lake levels drop at Hillsdale, or something were to happen to the plant, something mechanical, or, then we don't have
I'd be more
water.
afraid of mechanical, but
Yeah.
nonetheless.
But that applies regardless of where your water source is.
Yeah.
Well, it's true, but
I
you're
mean,
not
lake
gonna
levels
lose.
at Hillsdale is the same as lake level somewhere else that's being pumped over, and a mechanical issue somewhere else is the same as a mechanical issue here.
Right.
True,
So
but
that's not an issue.
True, but just like with any, I work in IT, and yeah, I mean, not very often are you going to lose both sources at the same time.
2 is 1 and 1 is none.
Exactly.
Listen to the prepper.
one other thing to note is you have this facility.
Yes.
As you start to build this facility, you really have 2 plants on the same site.
Correct.
Can I ask,
Yes, sir.
how common is it for maybe a town our size, our situation similar, to have 2 sources of water? Is that frequent? Is that?
It's pretty rare. A lot of places will have emergency connections with adjacent communities. That's not uncommon. That's actually common, provided that you have communities that actually butt up against you. So, for instance, Harrisonville, Missouri has 3 different emergency connections, but they have 3 different public water supply districts that connect, that are adjacent to their service boundaries.
Laura, you wanted to say something? That's fine, yeah.
Okay, so your last payment is 7 years from now, and I'd have to scroll back over, but it's about 3.25 million is what's left in payments, so that's principal and interest.
Is that something we might be able to, at some point, refinance?
That would be if the bonds are callable. We always refinance when we can. So we've already refinanced it once, so I suspect we're done.
Okay.
Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry, City Administrator.
Okay. Any questions for?
Do you guys have any questions or any interest in hearing anything about alternative delivery at this time?
Alternative delivery would be good.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. Thank you.
Get this up. You bet. Thanks. I'm John Mitchell with Burns and McDonnell. I serve as our alternative delivery director, and in my capacity doing that, I've delivered about 30 water and wastewater treatment plants using alternative delivery methods like EPC and design build. 28 of those have been right here in Kansas. That's 30 projects with we have an in-place construction value in the range of $400 to $600 million. So alternative delivery in Kansas for water and wastewater has really become the norm. The last probably 35 projects that have been done in Kansas, I would estimate that 30 of them have been done on a alternative delivery basis. And most of those have been progressive design build. And maybe before I get into the delivery method and some of the differentiators, and I just want to say I think I really applaud you for thinking about water resiliency. I think it's one of the most important things that governments do for their citizens is to assure the resiliency of their water supply. And while it is a little bit unusual that communities have resilient supplies and duplicate supplies, I think it's one of the smartest things you can do. I work with a number of communities that are making those investments now, in doing so because their communities are growing and they recognize that water is essential to the day-to-day lives of their citizens. It's essential to the day-to-day health of their economies. And even a small hiccup in the water delivery system, and your staff does a great job of getting water delivered day in and day out, but even a small hiccup in that can have huge economic consequences. And we're talking about, $8 or $9 million to have a backup supply or backup plan with Water One. But think about what being out of water for a day or two would cost you in terms of economic impact. It seems like that is a really, really smart investment, even without the economic data at my fingertips to go through that. So I think it's great that you're thinking about that. Almost every community thinks about that. You've got a great opportunity here because somebody's close by that can provide it. It costs some money to buy it, and it certainly costs some money to install it. But that certainly is an opportunity and one that we're fully supportive of and able to help you evaluate and navigate your way through. So Jeff talked about a number of things that might cause you to want to accelerate your project. The urgency, the fact that you can only produce 4 million gallons of water per day each day today, and you've already exceeded those demands on a couple of occasions. And that urgency in delivery, I think, is impacted by a couple of things that I'm seeing as a construction professional in the construction markets. And there are a number of market conditions that are coming together right now that are impacting price. And you've probably seen and felt that here in your community as you drive down the highway. Every bulldozer and earth moving piece of equipment is out and active. As you go north and south both, you see a lot of cranes in the air and a lot a lot of construction activity occurring. And that's one of the things that we look at frequently is a publication called Crane Watch. And it is simply a publication of how many cranes are in there and how that gauges construction markets and how much work is going on. And then that flows back to what the availability of resources are, what costs of labor will be, what the competition for costs for commodities like concrete and steel and electrical goods. All of those things are coming together right now in sort of a perfect storm. And as we look at it, inflation is impacting cost. A number of large regional projects that are going on here, both in the water and wastewater sector and in other sectors as well. And I think about, just on the top of my head, I can think of about $7 billion in water and wastewater construction that's going to go on in the next 2 years. And that's really going to drive resources. So I've had a lot of discussions with clients about when is that tsunami of work going to hit, and how can you time your project to make sure that you get your resources committed and get your prices locked in before we really start seeing construction costs accelerate. And we monitor construction cost indexes almost on a weekly basis. And what we can see here from the Midwest is from second quarter of 17 to second quarter of 18, we've experienced upward pressure of about 6%. Now, Jeff kind of walked you through the $20 million project. A 6% bump in the cost of a $20 million project is $1.2 million, and that is a big number when we start to think about that. So if we can accelerate the project and bring it forward a year, there's savings, I believe, that can be garnered, and the data supports that. The data supports that we're coming up at 6%. A lot of data supports that we're probably going to be heading into a period where those cost increases accelerate even faster.
And we have a labor squeeze right now, in particularly this market, because of LPKC and because of all the work that's happening with infrastructure closer to downtown.
Right.
Especially in the general contracting area.
You're
it's good for you guys.
You're absolutely right. And you think about just right up the street,
Yep.
Johnson County Wastewater is building a $300 million treatment plant. We're going to build a $1.6 billion airport in Kansas City pretty soon, and that's going to suck up some labor resources.
Yep.
So getting into the pipeline and getting your resources committed now rather than later I think would be smart business. Just, Mayor, as you mentioned, labor is leading the way. We survey contractors all the time to see where they're at, to kind of gauge what the labor markets look like, and 85% of the construction contractors that were surveyed here said it's going to be hard to get labor, and when it's hard to get labor, three things start to happen: schedules start to suffer, quality begins to suffer, and costs go up, and you can predict all of those things just by looking at labor availability. And just as you pointed out again, I think very perceptively, we're going to have a continued squeeze on the labor market. Construction Analytics forecasts construction activity in the United States, and this is no different in the Midwest than it is across the country. We're probably a little bit busier here in the Midwest than throughout the country, because there was sort of a prolonged contraction of the construction businesses in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, and a lot of contractors here went out of business. So now we've got this wave of work and fewer resources to accomplish the work with. So you're exactly right. This is what's happening in the labor market. So that kind of gets to the delivery methods. And there's traditional project delivery called design, bid, build. It's kind of what you're used to. An engineer starts out, designs a project. You go through that design period, you go through a bidding period, and you're 100% design and way down the road before you begin construction, before you select a contractor and begin construction. The alternative to that is a process called design build. And that is where you hire one entity, a design builder who takes responsibility for the design of the project, schedule management, cost, schedule, quality, budget, all comes in under one responsibility. So now as an owner, you're just managing one responsible entity instead of managing two contracts, one with an engineer, one with a constructor, and then sort of tacitly managing that relationship between them.
And we're already doing a project that utilizes that approach, and that's the Justice Center.
Yeah, so you're familiar with it?
Yes, we are.
Great, and one of the things that we've seen through this is really a consolidation of all construction activities under one contract, a consolidation of risks and allocation of risks under a single contract and with a single point of responsibility. And all of the research and all of my experience tells me that we deliver projects faster this way. And Penn State did a study of 1,000 projects, and they looked at projects that were very similar in scope and schedule, and looked at projects that were delivered by design build versus traditional delivery. And here's what they found. Construction only, they were delivered about 12% faster. The total project delivery cycle from the initiation of design to the delivery of the final product was about 33% faster. And these were done at about 6% lower cost. So if you think about that again in the context of how fast construction costs are rising, if you can avoid a year of construction cost impact and pick up 6% savings from doing a project on a design build basis, that 1.2 million now becomes 2.4 million, which is a significant swing. It moves the needle on the project, and it moves the needle on water rates and what people have to pay for water. So here's kind of the schedule laid out on a traditional design bid build, and Jeff mentioned this, that about 11 months to design the water treatment plant, and that's to design it, go through the permitting processes, go through the approvals with KDHE. Typically 30 days to get through a bidding process, and then the construction piece lasting about 24 months. So it's a 36-month delivery cycle. We analyzed it as if it would be delivered as a design build, and we know that can shorten that 36-month period to about a 24-month period. So the benefits in doing this is, well, one, you need the water now, right? So the quicker you can get it, the less risk there is to the community, and the better your water resiliency and the better your water portfolio becomes. It locks in costs a year earlier. In this model, we're really locking in cost about 120 days into the design. So we're getting earlier cost certainty and earlier cost commitment, and it delivers the water you need, 12 to 16 months earlier than a traditional process. So that is kind of my Design Build 101 tutorial. I'd be happy to take any questions about the delivery method.
Yeah, we're pretty familiar, like you said, because of the Justice Center.
Yeah, we did the exact same thing with Trainer Architects.
Great.
And they were kind of the point people. They hired the contractor at risk. It was Turner, I believe, was our organization, the builder. And it's been a really good collaborative effort. It does breed partnership, which is kind of nice, and one of the things that we're trying to focus on as well as a city. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. I think all of the projects that we've worked on, the real power in the process is that you've got, you know, your operation staff in the room, you got the designer, you got the builder, and everybody's kind of at the table on day one. In the traditional system, you kind of got the engineers going off to their corner and then coming out with the design that the people who are going to build it have had no input into.
Correct.
And
yeah. All right. Well, thank you very
you bet.
much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Presentation. Absolutely. So, Gon's next steps. I'm assuming that we'll need to get some direction on this.
I request the city council to provide direction on which alternative you would like to pursue based on the presentation.
Go back to the page that has them all.
Oh, the easel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be good to get back to if we can.
Which page are you looking for?
I think it's
The one that
14,
lists all of the alternatives,
14, 15.
Yeah.
all the dollars.
And right there. Oh,
No, it's
no,
next.
Next one. There it
Yes.
is.
There you go.
There it is.
Hey, Gons, what is our current 1,000-gallon cost?
It's under $2.
Under $2?
I will say 190.
Okay. And those numbers that we got from Water One for the minimum flow requirement.
That was
Those-
based on the meetings we had with them over the past last year.
Correct.
So they have a different scenarios.
Does that water rate drop with higher amounts of flow?
If we were to take less than 500,000, the price was higher.
Yes.
So the minimum to get the best rate was 500,000 gallons.
Okay, that is their best rate, though.
That's the best rate.
And that
Which
is
is at 362. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
324, something like that.
Okay. If we go to Water 7 and they're amenable, their board is amenable to working with us on a cost-sharing arrangement, I think that both these alternatives become significantly more affordable.
Correct.
I would almost say that we look at a combination of the two. And just because of the fact that, again, we may pay a premium for the water security side of things, but understand that water is the most precious commodity that we've got in this area. I think that it would behoove us to at least explore that opportunity. And we still need to do a bench study, correct, on the chemical mix, correct?
That was the recommendation by Water One.
Mhm.
I think he was saying, wasn't Jeff saying that?
From a corrosion perspective, we wouldn't have to do the mix, but
That's correct.
but from the calcium carbonate, that's something we have to look at, how to mitigate that.
And Gons, Water District 7, albeit a Band-Aid, and we discussed it about a month ago, what was their 1,000-gallon price?
I think they're about $3 plus.
3 plus?
I don't have the number with me, but
Okay.
I can
Yeah.
find out.
One of the reasons why they want to collaborate with us is so that they can lower their overall cost of
Yeah, they
water.
need about 1 million gallons for their future demand.
Right.
So that's why they're willing to share cost
Mhm.
with the city.
And we can get it cheaper for them, and they can produce it, so.
Okay, I think I have my direction how to proceed.
Well, I'd add another question, sorry. He mentioned other communities might have emergency sources or emergency connections. Is there anything around our area, around this? that we
Right
can-
now, we only have Water One and Water 7 for an emergency connection. That's the only two options.
And Water 7 would not be?
Water 7, there is a main line that is about, I think, 50 feet from our main line, 183rd and Waverly. So we're looking into what will it take to connect both systems for emergency supply. but they have to do a study to determine how much water they can give the city. So that's an unknown right now, but there is a point that we can connect with Water 7 to provide us water.
Would that potentially be enough to be? an
I
emergency
don't think
connection?
so. I think it will be $250,000, maybe $500,000 at the most.
But I mean, from the standpoint of capacity or being able to service in the event of an emergency,
It won't be enough.
it won't be enough.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's just.
Maybe
it's just
for a
too
few
small.
hours, one day, maybe, but not on a steady basis.
Correct.
Okay.
So, obviously, Gons can look into multiple options here, but how comfortable is everybody with a $40 million cost of having a second source? Because that's what you're looking at. And you still would have more money that you'd have to pay to go from 6 to anything bigger in the future. So it's 40 million plus for your security.
Over-
Because regardless of what
over
Water
20
7
over
does, they
20.
said they would partner potentially on either option, right? So Water 7 is a savings off the top in either case, unless they say otherwise, which
That-
we can find out in the future, right?
That is
So
correct.
take that off the table for a second. Do you want to spend $40 million for security?
Over
Because that's
20.
really what we're coming down to in this question, to me.
$2 million a year.
Yeah, it's $2 million a year. But then again, that's not a total sunk cost either. I mean, we can resell that water back and we'll get some revenues from it. It's not like we're just, leaving too much.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the
Wasting.
next governing body might not be as profit-oriented as we are. So, I mean, 20 years from now, you never know what that governing body is going to sell water for.
You never know. You never know.
$40 million, that's 150% of what it is for the other. That's pretty significant, and you don't have your added benefit of
We're
being
not
able to
controlling.
grow out, right? We purposely have that plan out there so that it can be modular,
That's correct.
right? So it sure seems like everything points grossly to Hillsdale. I understand the idea of a second connection, but that seems like that takes the back burner, that you find a way to do that as Water 1 comes closer, and if Water 7 grows a little further, then maybe we can connect in and get our second source, but for less than 40 million in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
Depends on how,
No way to know.
on the rates of water.
No way to know.
We could they could change their water charging and
Sure,
scheduling.
sure.
And,
No way to know.
they've also got to deal with their expansion budgets as well. So they may be raising water rates.
Yeah.
But the rate of water is what's driving my mind, because if you have $1.90 versus, let's just call it $2 versus $3, you're spending $1 more for every 1,000 gallons. We're looking at 6 million gallons per day for 365 days a year. I mean, do the math on just that dollar.
Oh, no, but the thing is, it's not and again, when I'm talking about Water 1, I'm talking about not a replacement water source. It's not going to replace our capacity.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting the investment of those dollars back to Mark's point, that's modular and to scale of what we need.
Oh, no, I'm not saying don't do Hillsdale. I'm not saying that at all. I think we need to do Hillsdale. I think that's important. I think that we need to have more efficient operation. We need to have higher capacity. That would set the groundwork for things. At the same time, we also need to understand that we have we have an opportunity here to bring another source of water online. And one that would be able to help to facilitate growth in areas of the city in the future, or the next 20 years, that would be very beneficial to us, like the east side of I-35.
I guess I was confused about 40 million.
Yeah.
I didn't see this as an either or, because down in number 4, there's Water 1, 2 million gallons a day, and then expansion of Hillsdale, 2 million gallons a day. And the difference in price is
27.
Yeah, 20 million.
That's fine, Lane.
27. 61 versus 88 and a half.
Yeah.
I was looking at the construction cost. The construction cost is, what, 8.4, 8.5
Yeah, total
million.
expenditure is what you care about.
Yeah.
Total spend, yeah, 88. And so that's, to me, that's the question, is it worth 27 million, not is it worth 40 million? Because I didn't even consider the first one as an alternative.
Well, that's fair
It's
enough.
not.
If you take the first one off the board, now you're down to 27.
Mhm.
Same question.
Same question.
Over 20 years? Again, what's the cost of water security?
Real quick, Gons, what do we have to do to our water to make it work for Water 7? So
We don't
like-
know yet.
Oh, that's part of our study we're gonna do, right? Okay.
There's a study, I'm working with them to see like I said, we have two lines parallel to each
Right.
other. So that'll be the best point to do the interconnection. But it won't supply the water that is needed.
Right.
It may be
So-
on short-term basis they will able to do that.
Yeah, but if we could get to a point where we could upgrade and then sell them water instead of having Water 1 sell it to them, because that's what they really want. Water 7 wants us to be the conduit so they can buy from Water 1 and it just goes through our lines to them. So we could
Yeah.
kind of not be the middleman and just be the producer and sell it right to
And if we
Water 7.
become the producer, now we're definitely using, again, economies of scale come into play, and now the cost to Water 7 drops significantly. I
Well,
get
it
it.
doesn't have to. I hope they're not listening, but
No,
we
but
can
I'm
just
sa-
charge them the full amount.
Well, I mean, that you'd have to look at to see,
Right, whatever
right,
water-
are we gaining anything by being a producer? Because our job is to take care of our
People.
residents,
Exactly.
right? Whether or not we can provide to somebody else is ancillary. So the only way that would even be on the table is if we're making a buck.
Well, and that would be, go towards increasing our capacity. We could use that as a goal to,
Well, right, but
Pay
everything
out
that
for-
was presented was increasing capacity to take care of our needs,
Right.
right? None of that was to sell off. Maybe we could do it in the short term, blah, 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 depends on growth, et cetera. Yeah, got it.
Right.
But we don't know where that's gonna go.
right.
Well, here's my other question too. If we're talking about being a provider of water to other entities, and they're willing to cost share, maybe we look at the full expansion of Hillsdale. Go straight to 6.
We are going to 6.
No, I'm talking, go to 12, go to 12. With a new
You'd have
finish.
to be selling quite a bit of water.
Well, that's true. I mean, I'm looking at the number 5, that's why
Number
I'm
5, the
mentioning
last
that.
one,
I mean, from the standpoint of cost,
It's not really that much more.
it's only 13 million more
yeah.
over 20 years, and we've doubled the capacity of our water, our water system.
It's almost 40.
But that doesn't give you your second source.
Right.
No, it does not give us a second source. See, that's the thing. I mean, it's either or. I mean,
I
what do
know.
what do we want as a priority? Do you want the second source, or do you want
We could
the?
have the
I mean,
honorable.
What is
Steve
the
Shute water
number that
tower.
everyone is comfortable with for security?
Well, I guess, so what is that bottom line to the consumer? I mean, when this all boils down and we're making this investment, what's the bottom line to the consumer between us getting that second source and not?
Yeah, I'd love to see this broken down into water rates.
Yeah.
What are the water rates
Yeah.
gonna be?
I mean, is that a
Once
significant-
we decide, once the governing body decides what alternative to take, then we can go to Larkin and they can run some models to tell us how much increase would be on the rates to
Is there
have.
no way to do that before we give you a direction?
can we do a study based on alternative one, which would be just the Hillsdale expansion, and alternative 2 being Hillsdale plus Water 1 interconnect?
Yeah, we can do that, yeah.
And is that Hillsdale expansion to the full 12?
No,
Or
it would be
just
just a
six?
6.
Right, okay.
In other words, then you could just see what the additional
Right.
water security costs you.
So the difference between number 4 and number 5?
No, number 2 and number 4.
Number
Yeah,
2.
2 and 4.
Now, keep in mind that if you go to 6, you have 4 from Hillsdale plus 6 new, you're talking about 10 million gallons.
That's number 5, and we're not gonna talk about number 5. Just number 2 and number 4.
I think the other important piece of that too is we have to understand what the cost sharing part of that is.
We've got to know what Alan and the board for Water 7 is willing to, how much they're willing to partner with us on the dollars. Because that also would impact what the decision would be,
Yeah.
or what the rates would be, obviously.
It will require some formal conversation with them
I
to
think
get to
that's
that point.
something we need to get to them anyway, because now that we have an idea of what alternatives we're exploring, they'll probably want to get to the table and see what we can negotiate. Am I correct in that, City Administrator?
Well, I think you're gonna, if you've decided you want to talk about alternative 2 and alternative 4, yeah, there's no way that Mr. Sutark can probably speak for his board. You're gonna have to, I mean,
We'll have to
we've
present
had
the
informal
water
discussions, Gons has.
Yep. So we'll have to have formal discussions at that point.
Now, the question would be how long, how fast, because time's ticking. They just told you
Yep.
you're in urgent status now.
Correct.
So, would you care to give direction on what you're thinking?
I think we probably need to have an answer one way or the other within the next 60 days.
Well,
Thinking-
can't the
Yeah,
direction
let's
be that you're
prioritize
gonna
it.
do Hillsdale
Yeah,
regardless,
first.
and then whether or not we do water 1 is
Would be
on top of it?
Yeah.
Right, because 2 and
Yeah.
4 have that same lowest common
Oh,
denominator,
both
right?
of them have Hillsdale, yeah.
So we
We've
can
still
direct that portion to start that process.
I concur.
Yeah.
Water 7's gonna be the Band-Aid anyway.
Well, Water 7's not a Band-Aid at all. I mean, Water 7 doesn't, they're
Water
gonna be a
1
net
will be the
user, not a
Band-Aid.
net supplier for us. Either way, because they don't have the capacity that we do.
So if I may recap, that's a directive to move forward with the indicated highlighted alternative 2 ASAP and get a water rate discussion of that and another water rate study just for that alternative 4.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then start conversations with Water 7 to see what they would be willing to partner with us on.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, Water 1 would be the Band-Aid, not Water 7.
Yeah, Water
I
1.
apologize.
Yeah.
One final question I had on this is, what's the difference between expansion of Hillsdale from 2 million gallons a day to 4 to 6 million gallons a day, and expansion from 2 million gallons a day to 6 million gallons a day?
That's the
It's just
new,
a new-
that's the new
oh,
6
the
million
finished
capacity in
plant.
addition to the,
Okay.
the 4 coming on. So it'll end up being 10 million gallons total.
Oh, I see.
So we're basically more than doubling the capacity of the plant.
Cons, is that gonna require a completely separate rate study from Oregon?
Excuse me?
Is that gonna require a completely separate rate study, or can we roll that in with what we've already collected from them?
I think we can roll into the existing rate study.
Okay.
Yes, a
Okay.
different scenario.
Yeah, okay.
All right? Anything else?
Just in case the consultant would care to charge you for that additional piece, since they've done quite a few iterations, would you provide thumbs up on that right now?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that's the directive. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gons. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Great work.
Gons.
All right, now it's time for public comments. We'll try to get this through as fast as possible, given the fact that they're about to kick off. The Chiefs game. Members of the public are
Don't say
welcome to
anything
use
important.
this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Again, only 3 rules here. One is that you stay within the 5-minute time limit. We have an audible alarm that goes off at the end of that 5 minutes. Also, no profanity and no personal attacks. Other than that, you are free to come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and be heard. Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I'd like to remove item 3.
Item 3, okay. Any other items to be removed? Okay. I'll entertain a motion on approval for consent
So
agenda items
moved.
1 through 2 and 4 and 5.
Second.
Motion Gregorczyk, second Moore, that we approve consent agenda items 1, 2, 4, and 5. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Consent agenda items 1, 2, 4, and 5 passed. Consent agenda item number 3, consider a recommendation to purchase an easement machine for use in sewer line service maintenance. Lee, what was your question?
I'm just curious as to what prompted this now. Was there a specific incident? Was there an injury or anything like that?
The easement machine project was originally presented to administration in 2016. and there was not enough. We didn't do a comparison between the different easement machines. We just went with one type. So we went ahead and did a RFP and requested additional information from various vendors. And that finally, we got the information, was presented to the UAC in September, and they recommended to buy the easement machine. But it has to do with, basically, we do a lot of sewer line cleaning. We have to carry the hoses, and there's a safety aspect that is in that was considered in 2016, and is that the hose they carry is pretty heavy, and that can result in an injury. So the injury can cost anywhere between $100,000 per occurrence. So we look at the safety issue and also the issue of maintaining the lines in a very effective way.
So there was no specific injury or anything like that?
No, sir. But the potential is still there.
Right. What is this? So is this a budgeted item? Did you have this in your budget for this year?
Yes, sir.
You did?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, I did have one follow-up question. It says $49,895 plus tax and delivery charges. The wastewater fund budget includes $50,000, so are we expecting that we'll need an additional authorization over and above the $50,000?
I think the funds are in the budget, and I'll refer that one to Matt.
I just want to make sure if we need any supplemental funding that we.
Tax shouldn't be issued.
Well, it's insurance, taxes and shipping.
We have money in the budget for that.
Okay.
We have like 55,000, I believe, budgeted, and if it goes slightly over, we have fund balance we can dip into.
Okay. I just see the wastewater fund budget including 50,000, not 55, but just to make sure that we have that covered. Yes.
No, I don't want to say money's not important, but any little overage that you're talking plus is what we would call immaterial, right? And
fine.
There wouldn't be any reason to look for offsets.
Okay, no problem. All right. With that being said, anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda item number 3.
Second.
Motion Baldwin, second Moore, that we authorize the city administrator to award a supply contract to Meyer Equipment and Supply in the amount of $49,895 plus insurance and shipping for an easement machine. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? Consent agenda item number 3 passes. There's no committee recommendations this evening, no old business. New business, consider adopting a resolution consenting to the leasehold mortgage in connection with a commercial facility financed with the city's industrial revenue bonds taxable under federal law, Series 2009, U.S. Industrial REIT 2. Laura Gurley.
Okay, different hat.
Yeah.
I'm wearing finance director hat right now because,
You worked on this.
well, Matt worked on this some, but I will take care of it for now.
Okay.
Okay, so let me summarize this first one really, really quickly, and bond counsel is here in case I mess this up or if you have any other questions. Number one, the Coleman IRBs were put in place in 2009, and they run through calendar year 2019, but that doesn't matter because this is totally unrelated to your tax abatements or your pilot payments or anything else. It's this simple. You're the owner of the property under the IRB arrangement. RT Midwest Commerce has a lease interest in it, and they want to use it as collateral. And the documents allow that they can, as long as you've given official permission. And that's what they're asking. Tyler, who's that? Okay, Tyler's nodding. So it's that simple. Has nothing changes except that they can use this as collateral for something they're doing.
Okay. Any public comments on new business item number 1? Hearing none, questions for Laura or for Matt or for Tyler Ellsworth from Kutak Rock, who's sitting in our
What's the
gallery.
downside of potentially for the city on something like this?
Good evening. I think the downside is maybe that there's another party to the transaction, so you would have to provide notice under the lease that's in place to RT Midwest Commerce as the lessee. You would have to provide additional notice to their lender if there were a default under the lease, and the lender would have opportunity to cure. I don't think that's a huge deal, but that's not for me to decide.
Yeah, I understand.
But, yep,
If that's the worst one, then
yeah.
Do we know why they're wanting to leverage it, outside of just the collateral function of it?
Yeah, there was actually a leasehold mortgage in place in 2009 when the bonds were initially issued. That was paid off and released, I think, in 2012. In any event, it's been released for some time, but not RT Midwest Commerce, that entity, but a parent of their parent is undergoing a change in ownership, and as part of that change in ownership, I think RT Midwest as an entity is one of the assets that's being sold and acquired by a private equity group. And so as part of that deal, they're seeking to use this as one piece of their collateral.
So it's basically becomes part of their portfolio of assets under management, basically, is what you're saying.
That's my understanding. That's correct.
And how much is it, just out of curiosity?
How much is a leasehold mortgage? I don't have that information, but I could provide it to you.
That's fine.
Okay.
Do we not already have to provide something to the lender for, in the case of an insurance claim?
Currently, there is no lender in place. There was a lender in place. Right. But there's not a lender currently, and so they're seeking to put a lender back in.
Right.
So
But
currently
we would
you
have to probably do that anyway in that event, right? Because of it. That way that lender could be able to, if there was a catastrophe and they want to claim insurance on it, they've got to be able to reconcile that regardless of if RTC goes out of business or whatever, right?
Right, except there's no lender in place right now. So
right, but if they get one because they want to.
Right, yes, no, that's correct. That's correct. It's not just if there's default, if there's other, yeah. Right, correct.
Okay. All right, anything else from the order? All right. We lost a council member, but we can still have a vote. This is for resolution number 1996. Can I entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion Moore.
Yes.
Second, Gregorczyk, that we adopt resolution number 1996, consenting to a leasehold mortgage in connection with a commercial facility financed with the city's industrial revenue bonds taxable under federal law, Series 2009 U.S. Industrial REIT 2. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Winters?
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilman Gregorczyk?
Yes.
And one not here. So with that, resolution number 1996 passes. New business item number 2. Consider adopting a resolution authorizing the design and construction of certain sewerage system improvements and authorizing general obligation bonds to be issued in an amount not to exceed $2,475,000 to pay the cost of such improvements, all pursuant to KSA 12-617 and 12-618. Hi, Laura.
Hello. This is proactive. Previously, when you approved the consent agenda, there was a lift crane on there, and that project is being bundled with the future south lift storage tank that was in the approved CIP projects in the 2018 budget. Both these projects were. And as our bond counsel is a proactive guy, he bundled these projects together because we're going to be bundling them for financing efficiencies, and wrote the resolution to cover both projects. One you approve tonight, one you'll be approving probably on November 19th after the bidding takes place. So we put in placeholder estimate and added cost of issuance. So if you approve the resolution, we're good to go on making sure we can officially reimburse ourselves when we do the future bond issue.
I like proactive. Good job, Tyler. That being said, I will accept public comments on new business item number 2. Hearing none, any questions or comments from the body? Okay. I will entertain a motion then on new business item number 2.
So moved.
Second. Motion Melton, second Winters, that we adopt resolution number 1997, authorizing the design and construction of certain sewerage system improvements and authorizing general obligation bonds to be issued in an amount not to exceed $2,475,000 to pay the cost of such improvements, all pursuant to KSA 12-617 and 12-618. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Winters?
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilman Gregorczyk?
Yes.
Councilman Melton?
Yes.
Resolution 1997 passes. Now we're off to council updates. Staff have anything for the council? I will start this time with Captain Kraut over there.
No, I have not.
All right. Take it easy, Tyler. Thanks for coming. City Clerk.
No, sir.
Finance Director, interim, Mr. Moore. Or Mr. Wolf, I mean.
Yes, sir.
I said Moore.
We have the same glasses.
Mr. Wolf, yeah. We do have the same glasses. City Attorney.
Nothing.
Okay. Michael Kramer in the corner there.
Yeah, I have a couple things. I'll try and make them as brief as we can. Pavement management, we've got contractors are pretty much wrapped up. We do have punch list items that they're going through and working on compiling all their quantities and such for their final payments. But again, on those issues, we'll withhold any final payment as far as retainage and such until we're satisfied on those punch
And
list items.
that's like the
ramps.
Truncheons over in like Willow Springs that are chopped off and all the.
On the truncated dome.
That's the one I was
that-
thinking of.
Yes.
So
Some
we're
other T word.
that is one of the issues. But as far as their compliance, I think that's still somewhat of an issue whether or not they are compliant. We do have some letters from the manufacturer and such that came last week. They have looked at those, and so we have to review those and follow up on that.
Great.
And then, was there anything else on the pavement management?
I think that was the one thing
That was the big one that was
Okay.
sticking out. There was just the cleanup of all the.
And so we are waiting for the chip seal contractor to come back, and then some other cleanup on the project as well. And I don't have the detailed punch list with me, but those things are included. And then wanting to visit, hopefully briefly, about the airport. In regards to the temporary restroom, building codes has indicated that the existing outdoor restroom, and this was in their Friday minute memo as far as connecting it to the sewer system, they can be used as a temporary facility until such time as the terminal buildings are reconstructed or replaced. That doesn't mean that we aren't going to have to do some work to it, et cetera. We'll still have to evaluate that, but we can potentially use that. On the sewer, we have the 50% plans. Utilities and Public Works have both made comments on those documents and working with the designer to get those updated and finished. And those, even though the sewer's underground, they still have to go to the FAA for airspace approval for construction on the airport. That's about a 90-day process, and so along with our funding being shown as a 2019 CIP, it also looks like we are on schedule for getting that constructed in 2019. And with that, one of the questions that we've heard is, and we heard it last winter as well, is can we temporarily open up that existing restroom and the septic field, at least to get us over the winter months? And last year I wasn't at all comfortable with that. The field was, last year we had a tremendous amount of rainfall, et cetera, that continued to saturate it. So the existing field's been allowed to set quite a while. It's not so saturated. We could go out and pump the septic tank itself again and kind of get it back to square one. And so we did reach out to our consultant. They're still considering it a little bit, but their initial reaction was, it'd be better just to keep it closed, based on the soil conditions and the items noted in their report. So I guess, our consultant is recommending, at least at this point, to continue to keep the septic field closed, and knowing that, the sewer's not that far away. But I did, and so I myself don't feel, 100% confident that opening it will continue, that means it will work and function. I think it could be tried with the understanding that, if it starts having issues, we're going to have to close it. But with the, with the consultant's input, I guess I just kind of wanted to bring it to council and get your thoughts and feelings, and because I, felt like this should really be a policy decision of whether or not we open it and close it.
You want to take it?
Yeah, I was just going to ask what the risk is if it fails and we end up closing it. And is there any risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's your risk. We just end up closing it again, and your risk could potentially be if the septic field is failing out in the field and overflows out in the field, which is near the park and the ditch and such, and then you could have some wastewater in your ditch. And if we were going to do it, I would recommend not opening it or doing it until it starts to get cold and when the ladies especially start having issues with being out there.
So I think personally, it's worth the risk.
Open it up.
I don't think it could get worse. I don't think it could get worse, but from the standpoint of the septic line, the sewer line itself, we're talking about next spring, probably before that gets completed. So I think that, for crying out loud, is what, a 4-month period.
What do we need to have the VAA do in there to get the bathroom so they can get that working while they?
That's a separate building issue.
Oh, right. Well, I was just going to say they had offered to volunteer, so maybe we say, hey, you've got until spring to get that bathroom cleaned up and working. Do we want to offer that as an option?
I don't think we can.
I think we'll look at what the restroom takes, but
yeah, we'll get a restroom. They'll be warm and toasty. Right. That's important.
And honestly, there's not going to be that much traffic there anyway in the winter months, especially if there's snow on the ground. Our airport is not going to see a lot of air traffic. So I think there's very little risk at all in opening it for the winter.
Yeah, the worst case is that we're in the same boat we're in now.
Right. Exactly.
That's fine.
Yes, Larry.
Just as a point of clarification, there will have to be some expenditures in checking out the heating equipment and so forth in the building to make sure that we can heat the restroom once we, because that heater's been out of service for 2 years, so we'll have to go through and spend a few bucks doing some maintenance and checks and make sure the water system's running and not going to stick open, et cetera, those kinds of things.
That's great. Thanks. All right. Anything else? All right. Thanks. Larry, you got a thing for economic development?
Yes, sir. I have one report that is an update on the mowing issue for the for Moonlight Road. But before I get to that, I do have a business person in the audience tonight. We have a need to look at the massage therapy fee schedule and the limitations that we currently have in the process that we go through in citing our location and citing our licenses. And I've already had this discussion with the chief, who's not here tonight. But so we're both in agreement that these are two issues that are basically going to need a consensus from you fairly quickly. We have a massage therapist who lost his location. So he has he's a licensed therapist, and his wife is a licensed therapist with him. They had paid for the site location, but they were under contract, under lease, and they've lost their lease, and they still have the rest of this year basically in a site that they're not allowed to use. We do not have anything in our code currently that allows us to transfer the lease or the license from the current location to anywhere. So if they wanted to get a license, they have to apply for a new license and pay a year's worth of license fees, because we only charge a year at a time, so it'd be another $200+ for 3 months, and then they have to do it again in January for the next year. So my request is that if it's okay with you folks, we would like to have the ability to modify, bring back to you for approval the fact that we need to, I would like to have at least a 50% capability, so that if somebody comes in at the middle of the year, I could issue a license for half our normal fee. And the other part of that would be to allow us to be able to transfer an existing license that's already been paid in full for a full year to another location. Now, we'd still have to do all the inspections and everything that we normally do to license the new site, but the people are already licensed, and it's just the site itself, which is a little bit easier to do than the time frame for the people that's involved. As a matter of fact, we can do that probably in less than a week, which is faster than we could get the changes in code back to you. So I would ask that we, use the city attorney to look at code to make the necessary changes to bring back to you as quickly as possible, if that's feasible.
I'm fine with reasonable to me.
I have 2 questions. It's reasonable. Could we prorate it at a quarterly basis to give them a little more wiggle room? And then the site, would it be another commercial site, not a residential site?
Correct. They are looking at a commercial site, yes, sir. And the transfer, I would assume, would need to be to another commercial site. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
That was our intent, was it to be another commercial site. We have already looked at the quarterly question. Our license is $200 plus some fee costs. So, $100 for 6 months or $100 for a quarter, I don't think is out of line for what we go through in either way. But for $200 for less than 2.5 months is a little high, I think, for a business to try and reconcile itself. And I don't know that, and I asked for direction from the city attorney, I don't know that there's any possible way for you tonight to waive that or to allow me to go ahead and initial a new location without making the changes in the code.
Yeah, that'd be code.
I think we need to bring back an amendment to allow for that.
So we could do that fairly quickly.
Okay, great.
So
Thanks,
thank you. So that's item 1. The second item is I want to give you, the council, an update for the questions that you brought up, and we have a mowing map in front of you here. It's already up. Okay, I think. So we're gonna jointly gang up on you here. So do a quick recap. Clear back in July 2nd of 2018, at a city council meeting, we had some property owners located at 900 and 901 Witch Hollow who expressed some topics of concern for some right-of-way mowing that was behind their house along Moonlight Road. And also at that point in time, this had been brought about by a notice of responsibility to clean up a bunch of dead trees and so forth that were also along that property area. And they had come to the city council and they asked for some assistance in taking care of this issue. And the city did go out and through its Parks Division removed 7 dead pine trees at the city's expense. It took several days of work and clean up, and then the city did also mow and clean up at one point in time the property. They came back again and asked for additional assistance with the city, and the city council asked for staff to look at whether or not there was additional locations throughout the city that were possibly also needing to be looked at in regards to whether or not they should be mowed by the city or taken care of by private property. So what we have in front of you is a map that shows those mowing areas in the arterial area. And we'll have Michael go over those with you now.
Yeah, so on the map here, this view is obviously hard to see in this format, but we've got some zoomed in areas. But real quickly, we looked at the areas along mainly the arterials, and we updated our existing mowing map and then looked at areas along arterials that weren't being mowed that had residential lots backing up to them. And so a lot that's maybe on a cul-de-sac and it's double frontage and has either a rear or a side lot along an arterial. And so we've indicated those areas in red. There's quite a few along Moonlight, some along 183rd, Madison, and over on Waverly Road. And so if you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So overall, there's about 89 acres of mowing along arterials that is contracted out between Parks and Rec and between the Public Works Department. And so again, along Waverly Road and 167th, this is just an example. The red area you see there on the northwest corner of that intersection, those homes back up to Waverly or 167th, and they're not currently being mowed by the city.
And
Yes.
And that's a berm. There's a big berm there on that part of the 167 too, which makes it a little bit more difficult.
And there is an HOA there too, and I'm not sure if the HOA maybe maintains that berm. On the next slide, Amy, if you will, so this is just south of there, and it showed up on the other slide, but between Fountain and north of Mockingbird there on Waverly, there was an asphalt path behind the homes along Waverly. It's an old path. It's not in good shape. It was built by the original builder and originally maintained by the original builder. In the last year or so, there were some codes violations issued out there. Again, city staff went out and cleaned it up one time as a courtesy. It's been a great deal of time between Fountain and Mockingbird, and have maintained it periodically ever since. And so this is one of those areas that, again, there's some inconsistency in our practice. You know, typically what Parks and Rec is mowing are areas along arterials that either the city owns a park or there's a trail. And so if there's a trail there, it's being mowed and maintained by Parks and Rec and by their contract with a mower. And for public works, we're going out generally and doing some ditches, and then there's some properties, for whatever reason in the past we started mowing them, and we're still mowing the area adjacent to the right of way. And so, you know, if it's not broke, we keep doing it, I guess.
I just started mowing it and the city stopped.
And so so again, we're mowing about 89 acres. The red areas that we have are about an additional 11 acres. And we'll look at some more as we go through the slides. I've only got 3 or 4 more. So on the next slide, so this is East Madison Street. Pretty nice sidewalk there, running up and down Madison, close to Moonlight. These areas, these homes, you know, back up or have a side yard on Madison. This is not being mowed under contract. I believe it's probably the individual property owners along there. They all have gates going out to the side from the backyard or side yard. The next slide, 183rd Street, down near Cedar and Maple. And so this, again, the red is an area that's not being mowed. On the south side of by the city. On the south side of 183rd, that's some ditch area, I believe, that we're mowing. On the north side and to the west, that's where our trail picks up and city property, the fire station and the wire tower and such. And the next slide, again, this is the issue that was brought to your attention earlier this year by residents down in South Moonlight. The red areas are currently not being mowed and maintained by the city. The area that's in the gold or yellow that's in question, that we have, you know, picked it up for at least this year based on the complaints and the direction that we thought we heard. But and so again, if you look at all the areas and throughout the city, we think there's about, right now we've found about 11 acres worth of mowing. It'd be about close to $10,000, we believe, on the mowing budget. Right now we spend about 40. So we think it'd be another, $5,000 to $10,000 to get these areas added. Per our codes, they're areas that are the adjacent property owner's responsibility. And Larry's trying to jump in here, and so I'll let him. And we'll go from there.
A couple of items I do want to bring out to your attention, though, is that not all of the areas that we've shown in the red, even though the city is not maintaining them, are being maintained by private property owners. I mean, they're private property owners, but for example, you have the Moonlight Residence Apartments here shown on the left side of that yellow area across the street, and that's all taken care of course, by the groundskeepers of Moonlight. And we have several other areas like that we've shown you in the red area. So it's not homeowners necessarily that in all these areas that we're taking care of. So we wanted to caution you a little bit in the fact that we really don't have enough data possibly to have you make a decision, but we wanted to update you and let you know what we have here and see what maybe questions you might have in that regards. There are some homeowners that are taking care, some homeowners associations involved that are taking care of some of these areas. Blue Hawk is specifically over 183rd in an area we haven't shown you to the west of this. The west of 183rd, the one we did show you, is active, and they take very good care of their area down there. Same thing up at near our substation on Waverly, the first one we showed you. We do some mowing up there in that substation area. Kind of borders in the same general description, but so this is kind of an update for you, and we wanted you to be aware that there's a lot that we're doing and that a lot we take care of, but it can get expensive if it continues beyond more than what we currently kind of have shown you tonight, simply from the point of view that these are the arterial streets. You have all of that other housing area that you saw. People are doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is taking care of their property.
I think some of the problem, though, like in this particular case, East Witch Hollow Street, the residents that moved into these homes have existing fence line and no access to the back side of that fence, the street-facing side of the fence. Mm-hmm. So if you live there, you've got to basically pack up your lawnmower and drive it all the way out to the corner, park your truck, walk your lawnmower over to your to your spot and mow your grass. It's really, or you got to bust a hole in your fence, and if that's your grass. And I think that their perspective is, it's not even my yard. I don't know whose yard that is. It's not mine. Mine ends where my fence is. I think that's the perspective and the feeling there. And I know there are other areas around the city. So what is the cost for per acre to mow? What do we pay?
Based on our budget numbers and the preliminary I had, around $500 a year
per acre.
At what frequency, Michael?
And that's just an average because our contracts are broken up into different frequencies and obviously weather dependent and growing season dependent. And
so what are we looking for consensus then potentially on whether or not we want to?
I mean, in my mind, some of these make obvious sense that we should be mowing them. I mean, some of them are kind of iffy.
Seems like we need a clear policy though, so it's not just,
Is this more of a work session maybe?
Maybe, because, I mean,
Maybe
they only drew a few lines here, right?
Maybe a formal presentation.
But there's a whole lot of places that you can start pointing on the map. And I would also ask the city attorney, if this is the property owner's property and responsibility, do we have any issues with us, or is the city technically trespassing? And if we have if an employee falls and gets hurt, do they sue the property owner potentially?
Or is this all right away?
It's,
Right?
This is right
the
away.
the areas in red are in right of way.
They are in
Yes.
right. Okay.
Yeah, they're back there working in mine all the time. I mean, putting in fiber and digging up water lines and all
Leaving
kinds
piles of gravel.
piles of gravel. That was a scandal.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a work session, we need to understand, you know, what the cost is, what a contractor can do, what we can self-perform, amortize machinery, staffing. I mean, there's a lot to it just to mow grass.
I think at the end of the day, we just need to have a clear policy of when we're going to mow and what situations, and going forward, Larry, when they're doing a development, could know, hey, there's fences going to be put up there. We're probably going to own that mowing responsibility. Because, I mean, that's a great point, Lee. To go all the way around there to mow that, there's no way.
Well, speaking of policy, can you initiate a policy that allows or dictates for rear entry or rear exit on fencing that faces roadways?
You mean mandated gate?
Sure. Or talk to the HOAs. How many HOAs do we have in the community? We have a lot of them, if I'm not mistaken.
There are 16 or so that are registered, but there are only maybe 50% of them that are active.
Right.
Yeah.
There are quite a few, especially in the southern part of the community, that have basically gone away. I mean, the HOA still exist in theory on the books, but they're not collecting money and they're not maintaining their entrances.
Right. Well, and there's some communities like Rich and Lee and I, half of it's an HOA, if I'm not mistaken, and half of it's not. So,
Same thing
yeah, let's
with
take a look at it, a
Evergreen
little
Park's the
deeper,
same way.
deeper dive.
Yeah. We have an active HOA right around us, but in Evergreen Park, we have one that's there, but it's not. So, yes, Laura.
Okay, I'll speak for myself. I'm not completely clear what a deeper dive would entail because I don't know that you're ever going to get as deep a dive as you want. We're talking average, right, this is a policy thing. So do you want to open this door? Question one, do you want to take on additional mowing? That's really what we're talking about. Do you want to take on additional mowing along arterials?
I would say yes, from my standpoint.
I think there's a beautification argument, and there's also a, just basically quality of life maintenance, especially when you have trails or sidewalks along those areas. It could be a.
I'm abstaining due to my obvious bias.
I mean, initial response would be yes, but looking forward, you've got, like this picture shows, the west side, we're not having to take care of. And if we get across I-35 and double the city, are we going to sign up for all of that now too?
Yeah, that's
so.
that's a good point.
I think it comes down to a long-term decision on this policy, not just fixing the problem that was presented in this isolated case.
Well, maybe we just have a presentation then, get some alternatives put together by staff, and then we make a decision. But it's a presentation, it's not really a work session. I don't think it would take
Laura,
that long.
are you asking if there's anything that you need to present that you haven't already presented? Or
Well, that's what I'm looking at Larry and Michael, because how much deeper can we go to help them in a presentation format?
So I think a couple things. One is some more detailed costs.
Yes.
Some more detailed looks at different areas, not just the few we've shown. And then also, taking a look at, our policy in some of those areas that we're not sure about. And then, if we want to look at what other cities do in relation to this type of issue.
Yeah, I think what I need to give you a definite answer on what I would like is I need something to build a policy around. Like, what
do other cities do?
Yeah. What do other cities do? What are our responsibilities? How do we draw the boundary lines on what we're going to do versus what we're not going to do? Those things we need to find out.
Because, like, for instance, in my backyard, there's no sidewalk. So, I mean, where yet a lot of these other places there is. So, I mean, do you say that the city's only going to mow where there's sidewalk or walking trail? I mean.
Well, right, and then, to your point, is there a certain distance that you're putting there? Because, take this same spot. If you said 2 feet off of the right-of-way, well, now they have to mow a 2-foot strip.
Yeah.
They still can't get to?
Right.
Right, so,
Exactly.
right, there's a lot of details there.
Okay,
I think
well-
it's muddier than ever.
We'll do what we can to clarify
Just
it.
bring, yeah, I think the direction is just to bring us
Lots of
some
options.
Alternatives and some pricing.
I would say proposal for a policy.
Correct. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Larry. Parks and Rec, Jason Bruce, and before you get started, I want to take this time to commend Parks and Rec staff on an amazing event this past weekend with the Grand Slam Beer, Wine, and Spirits Fest, as well as Smoke on the Trails. I've heard nothing but amazing feedback on that.
Good.
And I want to thank you personally for your effort on that. But
I
please
appreciate
continue.
that, and also want to take this opportunity to thank all the city staff, not
Mm-hmm.
just our department. We had a lot of planning meetings, from those meetings to execution, especially with PD, being out there all night Friday night, and also our partners at Fire District 1, who were there not only Friday night, but all day Saturday as well for our barbecue competition. We ended up with selling over 1,050 tickets to the event for Friday night. And then Saturday we had 68 barbecue teams competing for a $10,000 purse. So smelled really good out there on Saturday. So I also did want to thank our volunteers with the VAA. They came out and provided some shuttle service in their golf carts for patrons out to Pioneer Ridge. And then they also brought a fleet out on Saturday to help with trash cleanup. So appreciate them doing that, and some tweaks that we can make for next year, both events. So already planning. So thanks everybody for their help.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Gons Garcia, Utilities.
No, sir, nothing.
Interim City Administrator Laura Gorley. Yes.
I like that.
IAC, you could do that too. Yeah, I do have a couple of things. Number one, there's been some inquiries regarding the previous city administrator's payout and how we're going to pay for that. And so let me just take care of that one right up front. I'll put the finance hat back on and walk you through that if you would like, which I think we should.
Okay, yep.
Okay, so beginning with the severance package of, let's use round numbers, $260,000, approximately $86,000 of that was vacation pay. You never budget vacation pay. You wouldn't have any budget to do anything if you budgeted every city employee's vacation pay. It is shown in your financial reports as liability, but it is not budgeted. So it is what it is. So we're going to take that off. That leaves $174,000. So, and also, let me stop here. Through the end of this year, you're done. Your budget's done and it's over, and essentially you've paid it up front. So moving on to 2019, 260 less the $86,000 vacation leaves you $174,000. Again, I'm using round numbers. So of that, I can tell you right now, in a 35-second glance at the salary spreadsheets, we have $117,000 in salary savings. And that just happens. We have an engineering tech and a staff engineer position that we haven't been able to fill, and that's not because we weren't trying, we just haven't. And every year when I come to you and talk to you about, well, next year it'll be Matt, but anyway, every year when I come to you and talk to you about end of year fund balance and things, that you always have salary savings because there's always turnover. So if you take that off, you're down to approximately $57,000 that we're not covering through the end of 2019. I'll just be honest, every day or every month that passes that I sit here instead of a certified city administrator that you would pay considerably more money, you're saving about $12,000, let's just call it $12,000 a month. Because while you've been very supportive and generous, I'm not a certified city person, city manager, and you're not paying that, and I don't take benefits. So you're saving that. So you're saving $12,000 every month that passes. And we won't be backfilling the senior management analyst position since Matt's handling the interim finance. So we'll save money there too. So really, of your $57,000, in my finance opinion, it's immaterial and you don't need to do anything and you've covered.
Thank you. Any other questions or?
No, I just want to say thank you because I had emailed the mayor and copied Laura on this, and I appreciate that explanation. I know a lot of folks out there were curious on the what, which would be the dollars and cents. The only question that I would add to that is, what do we expect the interview team to cost? 50, 60,000, less than that?
Oh my goodness, I'm
The headhunter portion of it.
well, we are still working on putting together those bid packages. I know that I talked with and I actually, if you want to speak on that, Alan, you're welcome.
Usually, search firm charges around 30-35% of the first year's salary. So figure it dependent upon what the salary ends up being.
And again, I understand that that cost is going to come either way, whether it's an early out or a contractual out. So I'm not trying to throw any curveballs here, just being solvent. So
Nope, and
thank you for
totally-
the explanation.
Totally understandable, and I actually asked Laura to pull those together and have them ready for us proactively. Yes, Laura?
Okay, so I had two more, if you're
Yes.
finished with that one.
Yes, fine. Thank
Okay, interestingly enough, we have an opportunity that came from CanCap through Wichita State University, where they're offering free training in Baldwin for all things water decisions. And if you care, we can send that information out through City Clerk Nasta. It's for elected officials and staff, and it's completely free.
Great.
On, let's see, I have the date here. Got to put up my eyes to see it. November 15th, if that's not too late in the game for you all. And it's in the evening from 4 to 8, and it's meal provided. So if you'd like an email from City Clerk Nasta saying,
Free food.
here it is, and do you want us to register everybody? I just given you that opportunity.
Where's the location?
Baldwin Library.
Yeah, Baldwin City.
So that was that.
Yeah.
And Gons is also going to provide that information to the UAC. So,
Great.
because since, hey, free is good, right? And it's supposed to be all things that you're talking about right now.
Great.
And then the final one is, staff would like to ask if we can do a work session next council meeting, prior to the meeting, this be on the thought processes of the finance team, including Municipal Advisor Kimmel and Bond Counsel Ellsworth, would really like to do Community Improvement District and TIF 101, because you have a public hearing that night that kind of starts the clock on your Price Chopper project.
Yes.
And they'd really like to just walk you through some of that information if you're all going to be here, or most of you are going to be here. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Do I hear, yeah, you're all
Yes.
here?
Yes.
Okay, great, we'll arrange that. They're already confirmed that they can come.
Great. Thanks, Laura, appreciate it. All right, we're going to go start with the governing body requests for staff, and I will start on my immediate left with Mr. Melton, because he was last time, so.
Oh, boy. So I've got a quick question on the pool. Did we find a leak?
We found the major leak.
Oh, that's good.
I can't definitively say we found all the leaks.
Right.
We did find a major 90-degree break on our concrete island, kind of out in the middle.
Uh-huh.
So we have contractor start getting pricing probably next week on
Okay.
repairs for that, because we also have to do.
We're gonna have to do a lot of backfill in there too, or?
Not sure yet.
Oh, they haven't, yeah,
Correct.
Knocked it out to find out
Right.
how bad it is.
Was this a design flaw in the actual
that I do
actual
not
island?
know. Yeah, I do not know.
Okay.
How'd you find it? Just like putting
We-
scopes through there?
Yes,
or-
we had a team come in from Nebraska, and they used cameras and found it.
Can I ask real quick?
Yeah.
You don't have to say specific pools, but you had mentioned at our last meeting how typical this is, though, of other municipal pools. Like, what were some of the numbers? Like, what was our numbers, and what were some of the numbers of some of the pools that or round guesses?
I don't know what our specific numbers were, other agencies. I know that several other public pools had major leaks this year just because of the lack of precipitation we received. I know Baldwin, DeSoto, St. Joe had a big one as well. So there were several public pools that were dealing with this year, just the lack of moisture.
Okay.
I thought Shawnee's complex also had a bit of a leak too.
Do you
It's
know,
on West Johnson Drive, that one.
do you have a rough figure for about how much this is going to cost us?
I don't want to throw a number out there to you, to be honest.
Just under $1 billion, right?
Just under $1
Yes, yes.
If I may address Ms. Foster's in the audience,
Oh,
can we at least this would be under the leak adjustment policy, would it not?
It has fallen under the leak adjustment policy in the past, where we do 50% of the leak. And so because the rate is the same as everyone else pays, when we do a leak adjustment, 50% of the leak is covered, and then 50%, so the other part of the leak is paid at the lower rate, the $5.99 per 1,000 gallons. And so yes, there will be cost savings to them, so it doesn't impact the pool payment.
Okay, great.
We enjoy the pool.
So it won't be good, but it won't be as bad as it could be. How about that?
Great, great. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Did anybody else have any other questions about the pool before I move on? So at the last meeting, Michael, we talked about crossing it, potentially looking at something at 183rd and Mulberry. I didn't know if you had heard about that or anything, so.
Yeah, and so I did visit with Tim about that, and you know, anytime with traffic control devices, you do have to look at the regulations and such and see if they're warranted, and so we do have both Tim and our on-call consultant looking at that specific location, and Tim thought we had looked at it once in the past at least.
I think
so
we brought
hopefully
it up
it
like
won't
2
take too
years
long.
ago or something.
Yeah.
So, but all right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure you were
It
aware.
is underway though.
Okay, thank you. I watched the planning commission meeting. I don't know if anybody else did, but it was very enlightening. And I wanted to, I know this is going to shock people, but I wanted to say thank you to Ryan Dink for kind of squaring away the planning commission and letting him know that, hey, look, you have a job. If you think it needs to be changed, make a recommendation, send it to the council, and get it changed. So I was like, yes, Ryan. I mean, I don't get that way a lot watching YouTube and Ryan, so it was kind of a weird sensation. So. So anyway, and then Joel Riggs, who's heading up the Price Chopper stuff, he had mentioned he would be willing to help us with some of the codes issues we're having, because he does stuff all over. And I really think we ought to reach out to him and kind of tap his experience, and because from his perspective, he just thought there were some things that were kind of weird, but that it was more or less, there was not a lot of flexibility for our staff. You know, there's like this, it's got to be this way, and that's the only way the code was written. So,
like the bicycle stalls.
Well, I'm getting to that. Don't steal my thunder, man. I got a whole page of stuff here. Chill out, man. All right. So, anyway, but yeah, there was some. But I think it would be good if we, reached out to him and said, can you, please help us with some of this stuff. And then the one of the things was the bike racks. I think it was 22 bike racks. Is that what it was, Larry? That are mandated because the new Price Chopper is so close to Moonlight and the walk path, right? So it has to have 22 bike racks, and it's like mandated in a code because there's no exception for a.
Well, it's 10% of all parking spaces in the location.
Right. So anyway, it was. But the planning commission, I mean, everybody's sitting around going, "There's not going to be 22 bicycles at any time at the." I mean, it'd be there'd be a road race or something rolling through town to have that happen, but I guess it could happen. But anyway. They were just kind of like, look, we don't really need them, and it wasn't an issue, a cost issue. It was just kind of there's something there that didn't really look right. But planning commission can only do 20. I mean, they can only take 2 off. They can only remove 10%. And so they backed it back to 20 parking spots for bicycles. And I'm like, well, here's again, we need the flexibility somewhere to be able to have people say, look, let's make this, a little bit easier on everybody. Then there was another, windows on commercial properties are transparency requirements, which is a complaint I've heard from other people too, that I think we need to look at with the code, because there was a guy who was going to build he wanted to build storage units, and the problem was the storage units had to have windows in the front. He's like, I don't want to put windows in the front. It's a storage unit. There's nobody needs to see in there, and so he was just said, you know what, I'm just going to forget about it. And he decided to sell the property and not develop it because he just saw that as something that he didn't really need to deal with. So there was also the parking ratio, which is in the national average is 5 to 1, which is, what is the 5 to 1 actually, Larry? Because they never really went into detail on.
The grocery store uses the average of 5 parking stalls to every 1,000 square feet of store.
Okay, so our code is 4 to 1 because there's nothing specifically about grocery stores, is the way I heard it on the thing, which is, so we either need to, and that's the national average is 5 to 1, so we either need to change that in our code or make some exception for grocery stores because they want as many cars as they can get in the parking lot, obviously. So, yeah, and then that was the other thing, the code doesn't factor in grocery stores at all. So things that we learn when we actually have a grocery store getting built. But I thought these were really things that we probably need to get brought up sooner than later because these are going to be things that are going to come up later on other things as well. So if I get consensus up here to have us all kind of try to get planning commission and that stuff in front of them as quickly as possible, and then.
Well, I can tell you that we've Finance Director, or I'm sorry, not Finance Director Gurley. It's now Interim City Administrator Gurley, and myself have acted proactively on this one, and we are bringing in a consultant to look at our codes from top to bottom. Title 17 is going to be evaluated. We've got that individual on a 6-month retainer contract to do that work. To basically look at our codes based in the context of other communities and see what we can bring in, and basically what our potential pitfalls are, bugaboos, gotchas, whatever, that are hindering our ability to be able to develop particularly commercial properties, but also with a focus on some residential within the city, and provide some recommendations to the governing body as well as the planning commission.
Good.
So, hey, did you want to speak on that at all, Laura? Okay.
I was emailing him during the meeting that the contracts, all the things he's asked about are ready.
Great, excellent. Awesome. So we've already started that process, and there will be presentations forthcoming on that.
Great. So, and then I know this is going to be. Where are we at with street trees? Just out of curiosity.
Oh goodness.
Since we're talking about it already, and just.
Yeah.
Are we waiting? Is that one of the things we're going to wait on with the consultant?
No, the consultant's definitely looking at the street trees. Okay. Yes.
But at the last planning commission that you watched, that was one of the items that got deferred because we ran out of time.
I know. Well, and I know, and that's why I was asking. I know it's going to come up again, so I thought I'd beat you to the punch on what we're looking at.
It's automatically being brought up at the next planning commission.
Okay. All right.
And that's the driveway widths are part of that also.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. All right.
Thank you.
So, and I wish the paper was here because I wanted to bring up the Bridging the Gap meeting because I know and it's been kind of vilified, but I like to kind of say that I've just recently become a part of it with the mayor and with outside agencies. And I'd like to think back about a year ago when we were all around here and we weren't really communicating with any of our partners. You know, our neighbors anywhere, we were all talking about how we'd like to see more communication and more activity with them. And I can tell you that those meetings, the handful that I've been to, have been very beneficial to having everybody kind of getting on the same page. Everybody understands, hey, look, this is what we need to do and try to help each other. And of course, no one asked me that at the paper before they decided to write that they weren't a good idea. So I think that it's been really good because you got a whole bunch of people in the room. We're basically able to kind of work out our differences and go back to, so if there's something that happens at that meeting, we're going to come back here and bring it to everybody and say, this is what we need to see about facilitating and getting done. We had a great one the other day, but I mean, it was really good. The information that we gleaned out of that is going to help the city grow. And I really want to thank Steve for being there and getting that started, because this is one of those things where, you know, it's changing the entire culture and the perception of Gardner, because this is something that's never happened before. And from these folks' perspective, it's making a big difference in their mind on how we're being perceived, you know, from outside agencies and entities. So
I will say that the relationship that we have now with the school district, the fire district, and with the county is significantly better from the standpoint of communication. We bounce ideas off of each other all the time, all sorts of things, from transportation to public safety coverage to MedAct. We talked a couple of meetings about MedAct. and some of the shortcomings there. And now, as a result of that, we've got better coverage down here for our city of 22,500 people, which wasn't there before. We had like 1 med-act unit, now we've got 3, with a 4th rotating in. I mean, these have been very beneficial meetings, and meetings that I think have been mischaracterized, I think, by certain media outlets. I would encourage that those continue, and I think that they should continue, because when we have open communication with our jurisdictional partners, it benefits everybody. We are all part of the same regional ecosystem, and we have to be able to live together. So, that being said, I appreciate your comments there, Rich.
So, and then my final thing is kind of I really didn't want to do this, but I feel obligated to. I got wind from a handful of people who were at the chamber event last week. What was that chamber? Is it what's it called?
The board meeting?
Was it a board meeting? Right, that's the word, right. That Councilmember Gregorczyk was having conversations with people that were privileged information was being discussed. So I heard that you were telling people that you were forced into taking action and that we did these things to ourselves, were some of the quotes that I had heard, and I find that ironic because the reason that we were in some of the situation was because you had released privileged information before, which is the reason that I brought up the censure so long ago. That potentially, could have cost the city a lot of money, and I would like to remind this body that releasing privileged information, is unacceptable. So we agreed. Another thing was we agreed a few weeks ago. All of us in there agreed that not to talk to the press. And yet, when we were in negotiations, only one person talked to the press. And I think that is unacceptable. That whole point of that, from the advice we got from the city attorney, was to prevent the city from litigation. So I think that needs to be rectified. The other thing I thought, well, since I read the article, was that Councilmember Gregorczyk told the Star that he had no knowledge of what was going on, which you were in every executive session with us, even on the phone. So you were actually the only sitting council member to vote for Cheryl's original contract. So I'm trying to figure out how you didn't know what was going on.
Original contract? I'm sorry, I'm a bit lost. First of all, I said I have no knowledge. No comment, basically.
No, but
Second
you said
of all,
sir,
I have the floor.
No, I have the floor because it's my council updates. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So, where was I? So I'll just finish up with the entire governing body is tired of you breaking confidentiality and putting the city at risk for litigation. In my estimation, you have lost the trust of the entire governing body. Please put your mayoral campaign on hold and enjoy being a councilman. Finally, so we are clear, I, and I'm sure that the rest of the body and staff, request that you please stop speaking publicly on issues that are confidential.
I haven't done so.
Okay. My council updates are done.
Okay. Next, so I'm planning on going this way, so Councilman Gregorczyk.
Mayor, I was wondering if we had, or if we were any closer to the 120-day city administrator plan. I know we briefly spoke about it, but I didn't know if we were any closer or...
I believe I gave you a copy of it, Randy.
Publicly, though.
No. Well, some of the stuff we can't discuss
I understand,
because it's
to Rich's point.
Yep. Okay. But you're asking me to publicly speak on it, and I can't speak on a good chunk of that.
Well, you can pick and choose.
Three of the items that we were addressing were items that we just discussed today with the water presentation. So yes, they are being addressed and they're being brought forward to the council.
Okay, thank you. So I was glad to hear Councilman Melton's takeaways from the GAP meeting. Is that the way? Is that what you guys call it?
It's not really a. It's what it is it's just an informal conversation. There's no real meeting necessarily. We just get together every 2 weeks to discuss issues that are pertaining to regional cooperation.
Okay, so I was happy to hear the takeaways, which I would suppose that the commercial builder and the residential builders were at this last meeting.
There were some, yes, there were some residential commercial builders that were in the room.
And
yes.
again, I'm glad to hear that the takeaways, do we have more of an extensive punch list that the builders brought forth for us to consider through policy governance?
They are, we got their information, we got their, actually it was really more of a,
Fact-finding.
It's fact-finding. There were some complaints that were compiled. We have those notes together. We will provide those to the consultants. And the next time we have a meeting with these developers, the consultant's going to facilitate the meeting. So they will be basically giving, or just basically talking to these folks about, okay, this is the list of concerns that you've given us, and where do you see the potential solutions lying? And a lot of it's in code. A lot of it is in code.
No, and I think it's a positive thing at the end of the day. I mean, if we can hear what the commercial, for example, your rigs comment about transparency of windows, bicycle racks. I mean, all that's very important, and we have to understand how we can maneuver our own code, because some of our existing code doesn't match up through a grandfather clause to the old code.
Yeah. And we talked about that as well, about what we do with infill properties, particularly on the residential side, that were platted under the old municipal building code, but now they want to develop on those properties, and what do we do with with those structures that are on old lots that are having to fit the new code.
So anyway, I think it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Larry, did we have any updates on the dog park?
Just a small one, and that is we have talked to the fire department, and we've talked to utilities briefly about the availability of the property. And then we've also received information on a grant that's available to help create the dog park itself. So we're looking at the grant application for that process, and then we'll need to spend a little bit of time doing some measuring and some engineering, because we'll have to create an entrance and a parking area separate from the security of the water tower issue. So those would be the main concerns that we're looking at.
Thank you, Larry. And then, Mayor, I just was looking for clarification. I understand that you and Representative Willie Dove have a meeting with Gardner Lake this Saturday.
Yes, we do.
What are we looking to get out of that meeting, or?
I think it's not really much of a getting out of for the meeting.
Maybe I'm saying it incorrectly.
Looking at, one, interjurisdictional cooperation again. For a good chunk of the history of Gardner, the city and the lake have been kind of standoffish in good times, and not so standoffish in other times. And I think that Laura could probably back me up on this, because she's seen most of it. And we want to be able to build some bridges there. And I've been invited by Larry Dimmer, oh goodness, I know his last name, Demaris from the Lake Association, to speak to their board. And I was very happy to discuss, to talk with them before, and now he wants me to speak to the entire Lake Association about how we can cooperate with each other. And it's not really that we're looking for anything from the standpoint of tangible benefit. I was just looking to see if we can basically create some goodwill between our entities.
So a larger portion of Gardner Lake versus a smaller portion of Gardner Lake is within our jurisdiction. But the larger portion of that, I got several calls as to why the mayor was, coming out. And several of them were under the understanding that it was for annexation. And I said, ma'am and sir, I have no idea. I can bring it up in council updates, but I have no idea to this.
There's a discussion, but nothing's taking place without the consent of the people who are out there at the Gardner Lake. I feel like there's some opportunity long-term to look at an annexation option for Gardner Lake residents, because, one, again, we have that common ecosystem. Two, we already have control of the lake reservoir. I know that the folks who are living on the lake would like to see the lake revitalized, dredged. I think we talked about that in last year. We were trying to get the grant funding for the dredging, which they were completely in favor of. If we combine our resources from the standpoint of, you know, the lake residents and the city, we could probably get further potentially on a dredging solution, which makes everything better over on the lake side. Obviously, they have transportation, you know, road issues out there, and you know, I think that there's some good synergy there potentially. So, would we want to do all that work without having them annexed? Probably not. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we want to. If we're going to be working on their roads, for example, we would probably want to have them annexed into the city so that we could do that. So that's where that came from. And I think that, you know, ultimately, you know, just like with everything else in this area, it's going to go into the control of somebody. It's not going to stay county forever.
No, and again,
so,
I'm just bringing it up on their behalf. They spoke to me about the $17 million investment on the wastewater side. They talked about, you know, roads and policing and lights.
You're talking about the Johnson County wastewater,
correct.
which is
what
fun.
they bought into.
Yep, that's true.
And then the ancillary items that you just discussed would equate in their minds to higher taxes. So anyway, I just was getting it out there on their behalf. I knew nothing of it 4 or 5 days ago, so just a heads up. That's all I had, sir.
Okay, thanks. Mark Baldwin.
Larry, is the parklet on schedule?
Yes, sir. We're finishing up the design characteristics for it now, and the utilities department up at the wastewater plant has offered us a location to do some assembly. It's because we wanted to build it, if we could, in an indoor facility, simply so we could work in whatever the weather was. So it should be on schedule. There'll be a short meeting, and I have to go look at the calendar, but I think it's a week for final design to be talked about, and then they actually will go out and start getting materials to build it.
Okay. IAC. Have we done anything as far as planning the joint meeting with the school district, that committee meeting?
No, sir, I have not.
Do we have an opportunity, it was in the Friday Minute Memo regarding the courtesy car and liability and such. Do you have any mechanism there to have an organization like the VAA or somebody else have the car, have the insurance, and we just provide funding? So
that was not a good look from our city attorney. I don't know.
They do everything. We're just subsidizing it.
Or if we donate a car to the VAA.
Right, I mean, a donation to them on a regular schedule.
Yeah, quite honestly, I haven't run into this before. Lee mentioned it's a kind of not an uncommon setup at airports, but it's a new one for me. My concern, there's a law in Kansas called negligent entrustment. If you don't know who you're giving your vehicle to or what condition or state that they're in, then there's a potential that you run some risk of liability. But if we gifted a car to the VAA, and they chose to do with it what they want, then they in essence would bear the risk.
I don't think they necessarily would mind that.
Just thinking outside the box.
No,
look at you go way outside the box.
Yeah, and I think that's important to do that. We should be looking at ways to get this done instead of looking at all the different ways that it can't be done. Because
I might jump in if it's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
We are pursuing other avenues with rental car companies, etc.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. And then my only other question is just, do we have a general update on annexation across the interstate?
Okay.
I know we can't do anything, private details.
There's some,
anything
some
general.
Some of this is confidential, but we.
Wait, don't say it then. If it's
oh no.
Hello, YouTube.
No. No, we are in active discussions with some developers to. Again, these folks are looking for buyers. They're looking for people who develop their land. They're not just going to annex to, because we're next to them. They are going to. Most of these folks are going to sell. They're not going to develop themselves. Strickers, for example, who own a lot of property on the other side of I-35, are not going to be developers. They're farmers, and you know they're not going to. So they're going to look for somebody to sell to, and that's what they're looking for. That's what most of the bigger landowners over there are looking for. Now, some of the folks on 199th Street that I have personally talked to are very interested because they want to be able to halt the encroachment of certain other entities into that area. But then again, you know, we've got, you know, that's a discussion that is moot unless we have contiguous access to their property. So that's where we are right now.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right, Councilman Winters?
Just a quick thanks again for the everyone involved in the craft beer. Echo his words there. I mean, nothing but positives. People are coming up to me, you know, several days afterwards and saying how great it was, and people from out of town thought it was awesome, and it was very well organized. So, very nice job. Yep. That's it.
Mr. Moore.
Well, first thing I want to say, I also heard a lot of positives about the Craft Beer Festival, and I kind of every time we do one of these things, I know we do them at our parks and things. I always think about how can we incorporate the airport into it. How can we, you know, park some food trucks out there, get some more activity at the airport. You know, and that kind of, I know that's a running theme with me, and there's a method to my madness. There's a reason behind it, and it's not purely selfish. Of course, I am a pilot and very interested in aviation, very passionate about it. But I also recognize that it's about 20% of Kansas's gross domestic output, and it accounts for a lot of jobs in the state of Kansas. The state of Kansas depends on airports, all airports, and ours is no exception. Even though it's a small airport, it's considered more of a hobby airport, a recreational airport. I made this point in a meeting last week. Pilots, jet pilots, don't just fall out of, well, yeah, I suppose they could fall out of the sky. They don't just fall into a jet as a jet pilot. You start somewhere. You start at Gardner Municipal Airport, and you get an instructor that's a private instructor, and you start taking lessons. Next thing you know, you're going into advanced ratings, and that may move you over into New Century. But you started because of the accessibility that an airport like Gardner Municipal Airport offers. And that accessibility is important because it will generate interest in our kids. And that interest is like a spark that can start a fire that'll last their entire lifetime. And they can find themselves 48 years old, council president at City of Gardner and working for a large avionics manufacturer someday. And all built on that passion for airplanes and all things that fly. That kind of thing comes from our little airport, and I can't overstate it. It's very important, and it means lots of jobs to the state of Kansas. Those jobs pay our stipends. They pay all you guys' salaries. It's a big deal, and that airport is a gem. It is absolutely one of our crown jewels for this community. So whatever we can do to make things work for it, we all stand to benefit. Even if you're not interested in airplanes, even if you're not a pilot, you still benefit from it, because I know of a little company just up the road that employs a lot of our citizens. And I have a lot of friends at that company that live in the city of Gardner, and quite a few of them are tenants out at our airport. So,
and that Garmin video with the airport. Remember, you forgot to mention.
Oh yeah. The airport occasionally gets used in marketing videos by a little company up north of here, and that's pretty handy. The last thing I've got is I just want to say I concur with the Council Vice President. Confidentiality is absolutely crucial. It's vital. to the welfare of the city in general, and it shouldn't be compromised for political expedience or any other reason. We have these executive sessions, not because any of us, and it should be pretty self-evident that none of us want to do anything but be transparent. But those executive sessions are absolutely vital. They enable us to negotiate in confidence so that the other side doesn't get an advantage over the city.
Whether it's land acquisition or anything else. I mean,
What doesn't matter what it is, and when you're negotiating, you know, the six of us and our attorney have to go behind closed doors and sort of put our heads together and come out with what our position's going to be and how we're going to argue it, and none of us should ever come out of those meetings and compromise that privilege, because it just undermines the whole process, and ultimately it costs us money, costs the taxpayer money when that happens, and it's inexcusable. So that's all I'll say on that, and that's all I got.
Okay, thanks, Lee. I'll just, a couple of things. I want to echo kind of what the council president mentioned about the airport. I have some folks in the industry who are close to me, they're friends, and the greatest danger right now to commercial aviation over the next 15 to 20 years is a lack of pilots. The pilot crunch is coming. The average age of a commercial pilot is rated for multi-engine jet, commercial jet is which is approaching 60 right now. And there's just not enough pilots coming out of the military to fill the gap. It used to be the military was the #1 conduit for commercial pilots, and now that spigot is closing. Whether it's because of drones, autonomous aerial vehicles, or other types of means, they're not putting pilots in the cockpit much anymore in the military. So now it behooves us from the standpoint of civil aviation or general aviation to fill the gap. And right now, that gap is filled by airports like Gardner Municipal Airport and New Century. That's where the next generations of commercial pilots are coming from. And we need to keep those facilities open and try to make them as welcoming as possible for that. And that includes FBOs. We've got to have fixed base operators at most of our, if not all of our airports, in order to be able to fill the need in the pipeline. So thank you for bringing that up, Council President. I'll reiterate what was mentioned about the Beer, Craft, Wine, and Spirits Fest, and also the support of the Gardner Police Department and first responders, Fire District, as well as MedAct, and the folks that came out there to kind of hold down the fort, make sure nothing burned down. When you got a bunch of smokers out there, I'm not talking about cigarette, I'm talking about those big smokers. There's a chance you could have one of many things happening. And thank you again also to utilities for the pedestals out there for the smoke teams and for the vendors. Tremendous job there. Again, everything just came off without a hitch. And that's a perfect example of how all the different departments come together and build synergy and create a tremendous product. And so I think you all should be applauded for that. That's about it that I have. And if there's no other comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Melton, second Moore, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? We are adjourned.